The Museum Roadshow is brought to you by 125 Apparel.
I'm Becky Mitchell from the Becker County Museum. Welcome to the Museum Roadshow. We are doing something fun for a third week throwback. We're digging into the archives from the museum with past directors and past speakers and doing what we do best here, learning from the past. Hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Museum Roadshow. I'm Roger Engstrom. This is 2011. This is the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. So we decided we should do some little history about the Civil War. And one of the prominent pieces of Civil War memorabilia that we have around town, or monument you might say, is the big monument out at the Oak Grove Cemetery that says GAR at the base. That stands for the Grand Army of the Republic. This monument was dedicated on May 31st, 1915, which was 50 years after the Civil War. And this monument, the funds for it were raised right here in the Detroit Lakes community, as far as I can tell. We happened to find a box of papers in the museum that Mary Lewis, the proprietor of the Lewis Hotel, had kept. And she had collected dollars for this project. The stone cost $1,800. It came from a quarry in Virginia, some of the best marble that they had. And Mary Lewis shows that she had raised this $800 of the $1,800. She got $25 from each of the three banks in Detroit Lakes for a total of $75 there. Then there were numerous businesses and organizations that would contribute anywhere from $10 to $15. And quite a few individuals contributed $5. And she had another page or more of people that contributed $1 or 50 cents. But by the time she was done, she had this money, and somebody else must have contributed or solicited funds as well to get this thing paid for. It was dedicated on May 31st, 1915, and that would be Decoration Day or Memorial Day as it's called now. And normally Memorial Day was always on May 30th. But that year, being May 30th was on a Sunday, it was May 31st then was designated Memorial Day in 1915. And in 1968, it was decided that we should make Memorial Day a 3-day weekend. So then it was always held the last Monday in May. So the date of Memorial Day now has varied since 1968. But this monument is a good reminder of the guys that fought and died in the Civil War. There were a lot of casualties in that Civil War. There's some 350 veterans from Becker County that served in the Civil War. E.G. Holmes was one of them. There was a guy by the name of Beestick, and he was the secretary of the Oak Grove Cemetery Association. And it's interesting to note that the Cemetery Association, I think, was 100 years old or more, and there's always been some of Beestick's relatives that were the secretary at the cemetery. I remember Parnell Sanford talking about that. Parnell Sanford was a banker in Detroit Lakes connected with Detroit State Bank, which is now the Bremer Bank. And when the dedication was held, and that day the mayor of Detroit Lakes made a speech. They had a big parade that day. It started at the courthouse and ended up out at the cemetery. And the mayor said, at this critical time in our world's history, gathered beside the sleeping place of those men who in the 60s went forth and battled valiantly for the great principles of which we of today are reaping the benefits, and to thank God for the many blessings which we as a nation have enjoyed during the past half century. And in thinking about what Mayor George Hamilton said, we are the beneficiaries of the work of those who went before us. And at that time, you got to remember 1915, World War I was going on overseas. The United States had not entered World War I yet. They didn't declare war on Germany until April 6th, 1917. 18 months later, November 11th, 1918 is when the armistice was signed. And the senator from Minnesota, Senator Clapp, also spoke, and he said, it is essential, he asserted, that each individual appoint himself a committee of one to teach patriotism, loyalty to country, and a defender of the Republican principles by showing an example of good citizenship as an individual, and thus collectively the American people will rise in an exalted height among the people of the world. And as I read that and I think about this committee of one, that means each one of us is responsible for this, and that we need to take it seriously. And the GAR was started so that these veterans, that when they returned from the war, would have a fraternal organization to speak for them on government affairs. It was interesting to note that up until 1900, there was only one president of the United States that wasn't a member of the GAR. And of course, they had their auxiliary organizations. The Grand Army of the Republic was GAR, and then there was the Women's Relief Corps, and that was made up of women that were connected to the guys that were serving in the war during the Civil War. Then there were the Sons of the Veterans, and then along with that was Sons of the Veterans Auxiliary. And it was my understanding that when the last Civil War veteran of the GAR post here in Detroit Lakes died, then that organization was disbanded. But then the Sons of the Veterans and Sons of Veterans Auxiliary kept things going for a number of years. Another monument that we have here in Detroit Lakes that's on the north side is a nice little park right by the Washington School, and some kids remember playing ball over there. A cannon was parked in the middle of the park there, and now we've got a nice stone in the middle of the park where there's flowers, and it's right next to two of the retirement homes in Detroit Lakes. And this stone, this park, was dedicated on June 4th, Memorial Day in 1952. And there is a flag at the museum that is quite large, and this flag was draped over the stone at the Oak Grove Cemetery, I think, when that was dedicated, and I think it was probably the same flag that was used when the park by Washington School was dedicated in 1952. Even though the Civil War was 150 years ago, it was still a big part of Becker County. There were 364 Civil War veterans that settled in Becker County, and coming up in future shows we will hear about one of these veterans.
I hope you've enjoyed today's show of the third week throwback here at the Becker County Museum, where we've dug into the archives, found those old stories of history, and shared them with you. And it's a good reminder, make sure and come in, share our stories, share your stories with us, so we have them for our future generations.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Museum Roadshow, brought to you by 125 Apparel.